Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now this is gonna be kind of like a bonus video to my champion ranking video series. Many of you do seem to quite enjoy them, and this is gonna be a little bit similar to the best champions rank up unduped, but it is different. So if you do not see a champion mentioned here, you probably will see it here mentioned in the champions ranking up unduped, because the point of this is the champions that I do want to be awakened, but I don't stress about signature level. So these are the best champions to rank up without, investing a ton of sig stones, that you still do want to get awakened at the very least, or to some kind of like lower specific signature threshold. And again, there aren't going to be too many of these because we have also the video of best champions to rank up unduped, but there is still a very kind of like specific category on champs that, again, generally I have ranked up, and I absolutely or barely stress about the sig level of those champions. Like number one is Kingpin. Kingpin has 3 signature level thresholds. He has got sig 1, sig 65, or sig 200. So if you do not have too many sig stones, my personal recommendation is basically do what I did. Get him to sig 65. That gets you just over 3 rages active upon you entering the fight. At max, you can get 4. At sig 1, I believe you are at 2, basically. So yeah, you want his thresholds to be sig 1, sig 65, or sig 200, and then, eventually if you do sig him up, that's fine, but I don't stress about it. Similar with Okoye. Now, a lot of people do max out signature level on Okoye, as did I, but I did it purely for prestige, not necessarily for the ability, because the only ability here that actually scales is while Okoye's health points are lower than her opponents, all endurance and precision buffs on her expire slower. But generally, that's kind of like a position you never want to be in to begin with, and especially when it comes to stuff like battlegrounds, then it means you probably lost the fight already, because again, opponent will basically always have the lower health points. So this is kind of useless for most part. So sigs in Okoye are purely prestige thing. You want to awaken her to have access to this ability, but that's about it. Then moving on, you have Yelena. And Yelena, again, a lot of people do sig 200 her because of prestige, but quite honestly, aside from that, if you don't care about prestige too much, that awaken ability is nice. It makes her like a little bit tankier as a defender for most part, but generally it's nothing game breaking, and she gets like a big benefit offensively if she's awakened, even at sig 1. So while Yelena is in elimination mode, her target cannot evade or cause attacks to miss. So basically, once you enter your damage mode, you bypass miss and evade, which is kind of useful and nice to have. And here, yeah, you basically reduce opponent's critical damage rating, and at max sig you reduce it obviously by more, but even wherever Yelena is, I think is kind of fine enough. And again, unless it is specifically for prestige reasons, I wouldn't personally kind of like invest in her, so it's entirely up to you there. Cassandra is another one where I don't think that awaken ability is like super important, or the level of her awaken ability. When inflicted with bleed, refresh 3 Cassandra's oldest personal regeneration passives. This is extremely situational. When Cassandra would inflict a personal neuroshock, she deals a burst, so she does get slightly more damage, but again, there isn't that massive of a difference. It goes from, let's say at sig 80, she inflicts 600, and at sig 160, she inflicts like 1k, but realistically, those aren't like necessarily the biggest numbers, even when you do take down to it in consideration. She obviously would increase your damage output somewhat, but again, I would easily rank for her and don't stress about sigging her up too much. Similar to Captain Britain, Captain Britain reduces the opponent's energy resistance for each neuroshock that they have, basically. But what's the best way to put it? When you get a couple of these, you'll easily reach the 100% reduction anyways, and it, again, for the most part, if somebody's using a counter against Captain Britain, this isn't going to help you too much. And if they're not using a champion that counters Captain Britain, they will get wrecked at whichever sig Captain Britain is at. So if not for prestige, I do think, sig 80 is kind of like fine to get her at. I think past that, there isn't like that big of a deal, as we can see here. At sig 60, it's 28% reduction, and at sig 120, 32% reduction. It's really not that big of a difference to quite warrant all those sig stones in her. Again, ended up having her at max sig, but that was because I invested some sigs in her and then I kept pulling her, but you really don't need stress about getting her to sig 200 in my opinion. Arnim Zola is another one that, you know, you can rank up unduped, but if he's awakened, you can also easily rank up. Actually, this I think is a champion that kind of overlaps, because effectively you get that burst. The main thing that you get is the burst on your at end of your special attacks when you remove the disintegration debuffs. But that burst is not big. It's not like a major source of damage to begin with. First of all, Zola is mainly defensive champion to begin with. Second of all, the difference isn't major either. And again, mainly you can use it for defense. And lastly, even if you use him on attack, then this isn't going to make or break the fight. And again, even when at whatever level he's awakened, if you do want to have access to that unblockable, you're going to be fine there as well. You don't need the full 12 seconds on that. So again, I don't think Zola is like really great target for your 6 stones. Jack is similar. I think as long as Jack's awakened, basically fine. Even unawakened, Jack does well, but again, if your Jack is like at some random sig 40 or random sig 60, I think there are so many champions in the tech class that require your signature levels way more than Jack does, and I don't really stress about his signature level. Red Skull's another one. He's also quite good unawakened, but you do want access to this ability ideally, so even at sig 1, you basically, every 10 basic attack hits grant you 1 armor buff. That's the main ability you want access. Nobody ever uses this one. You gain a little bit of power when you're charging heavy attack, but you never really do with Red Skull, because your focus, when you're using Red Skull offensively, is build up to level 2 as quickly and then build up to level 1. And charging a heavy attack for extended periods of time generally is the slower way to go, and it's just not good enough. Even at a max sig, that power gain is just not good enough for it to matter in his rotations. So sig 1 Red Skull, barely any difference from sig 200 Red Skull, as long as he's awakened. Starkhand Spider-Man, and this is kind of like the diminishing returns. Like my Stark is, I think, sig 20, but okay, ideally you would want to get him to like sig 60, but basically Spider-Man's taunt debuffs last 2 seconds longer, and each charge of poise grants him additional, here we can see, 985 critical rating, or at max sig, it'll be like 1300. However, it is subject to diminishing returns, and also, you basically crit all the time anyways, so it isn't like a major deal there, I would say. And yeah, so Starkhand Spider-Man is definitely a champ you don't really have to sig up highly. Yondu, I think, is fairly similar. It's just that it's the weaknesses. First of all, I don't think his sig ability is all that mandatory to begin with, but second of all, when you look at sig 200 weakness, it's like 40%, which is fine. But, you know, let's say sig 60, it gives you 25% weakness, right? And the key here is, number one, weaknesses are still capped at 90%. So if you get like 4 weaknesses on your opponent, effect is going to be the same. Because they're still, you still leave at very least 10% of attack to your opponent. And therefore the difference here is very minuscule. So as long as you have basically like 4 debuffs, this signature ability will do exactly the same thing as this signature ability. Or if you have 3 debuffs, they're going to be very comparable because inequity also comes into it. So I'd say basically it's like 3 debuffs active. This weakness plus inequity will do the same thing as the maxi weakness. So not the biggest of the deals. Right, let's move on. Sentinel's another one. Now, Sentinel, you do kind of get more benefit if you do get him higher sig. But mine's at like sig 80, and at sig 200, you get extra 10% debuff duration and a bit more power, basically. However, wait, no, power is actually the same. So yeah, you get extra 10% debuff duration. So I don't think it's like the craziest thing. My Sentinel is sig 80, and I'm fine with it. Eventually, if I have some spare 6 stones, I will sig him up further, but it doesn't really change all that much. It's just a tiny, well, 10% increase in his debuff duration. That makes him a little bit better, but definitely nothing to completely stress about. Another, now in Cosmic class, Hyperion, if you are taking him up, absolutely zero reason to give him any sig stones. He notoriously has, like, basically the worst scaling sig ability in the game. For instance, at sig 200, it's 75% increase, and at sig 20, it's going to be like 70% increase. It basically doesn't matter. It gives him an increase in Fury, Precision, Power Gain, and Regeneration buffs, but again, 186 stones can give you 5% increase. It basically doesn't matter. He has notoriously the worst scaling signature ability in the game. And yeah, no sigs on this guy matter at all. But you do want to get him awakened. Galan is kind of similar. I think Galan, the sweet spot there is 660 something or 670 basically. Because then you have two of these buffs that you gain whenever one of your immunities gets triggered. That's it. Galan sig 80, there's no real point in going further than that. If you do have Galan, sig 70, sig 80 is fine. Don't stress about the signature ability further than that at all whatsoever. Juggernaut, again, it barely scales. It really doesn't matter all that much. Juggernaut is just not a mystic you want to invest sigs in. Like, you get, some increase. What your chance to nullify is, I think, at max sig, basically, on 10 buffs, you have 30% chance to nullify per hit. And on sig 60, you have 26% chance to nullify per hit. It really makes no difference. It really doesn't. So yeah, Juggernaut, definitely no sigs required there. And we have Pavitr. Pavitr is also kind of similar. You want to have him awakened, for sure. And that's mainly it. I mean, it helps a little bit. But unless for prestige, there's no reason to kind of like stress and get your Pavitr up to sig 200. I think, for instance, something like sig 80 would be perfectly fine there as well. Each buff on the opponent reduces the duration of inexorable and stoppable effects. You're just going to make them shorter. It might max up to 80% anyways, because this ability is capped. You never can max it out. And personal energy vulnerabilities are paused during your special attacks. Okay, fine, but again, it functionally doesn't make too much of a difference. You do want to have him awakened, get him like some 660 or something like that, and he's fine, unless you're again going for prestige. So moving on, Werewolf similar. Werewolf's also very good to rank up unduped, but duped, his sig level doesn't really matter too much either. Mainly you want to access these abilities. If above 1 bar of power, gain unblockable buff, passive for 3.5 seconds on your Chilling Howl, or above 2 bars of power, you gain unstoppable and unblockable, basically. And that, makes him slightly bit better on defense, potentially, and, it kind of can help him a bit on offense. So he's perfectly fine to rank up unawakened, but if you don't want to do that and you feel like you'd be missing out something, then definitely, for the love of God, don't feed him many 6 stones. It doesn't change all that much for him. Lizard gets almost all of his benefit at like sig 80. Again, Lizard is a good example. If you take him up, unless you're doing it for prestige, at sig 80 you're basically fine. Because at sig 80 you get the increased potency of 25%. At sig 200, 15% to 25%. Again, it's nice, but it's nothing kind of too crazy. If you are kind of like looking at which 6 stones to distribute, again, there are other champions better suited for that than Lizard. Similarly, Scorpion. Scorpion absolutely is a champion that you get to like sig 60 to sig 80 and you're good. His awakened ability, he can do without it to begin with, but obviously in Alliance War and in Battlegrounds, you do want to have that access to the region. So get him awakened, get him to like sig 40 to 80, and you're not going to be missing out on much because, again, you're going to be regioning most of what you are denying to your opponent anyways. There is not that big of an increase in the percentage here. And on top of it all, it's still capped. So it's not like you can go super high with that region if you get, him at max sig. So it doesn't really change all that much for Scorpion. An additional champion here would be Modok. If you are taking up Modok, you do want to have him awakened. But his awakened ability is basically for attack on mainly. The one thing that scales there. Because he does get increased ability accuracy, which means your heavy attacks would cause more incinerates, and that mainly would help him on attack. For defense, you just want him at sig 1. And it will not change anything, and then you don't want to give him any more 6 stones. Obviously, as I mentioned, there are plenty of champions that you can rank up unawakened, and there is a video that released for that specifically. So I will leave this video in the video description in case you guys want to like reference that as well. For instance, Solwark is perfectly fine to rank up unawakened, in my opinion. And then there'll be many more champions across like different classes and stuff. But there you go. I hope this video is useful to some of you, and I'll catch you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about